Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host, Jordan Faso, and this week I'm just going to do a review of the finals week 1 and then just do a preview of the 2 games that are on the weekend. So we'll go through the 4 games from the weekend first and then switch over and do the upcoming ones for the semi-finals this week. But finals week 1, done and dusted. Probably one of my, other than the grand final, my favourite week of finals. Just sort of sets everything up for what's to come and, who's going to have home prelims and whatnot. So, what a weekend it was. Finals footy, as I said, just a love of not only mine but all the fans. But it's so intense all the time, and even in the blowouts, like the teams that are winning are just so pumped. You saw that with, obviously, Geelong when they were just piling on the goals against Port, and same for Hawthorn and Brisbane. So it's just, I know there was a few blowouts other than that Sydney derby game, but it was a great weekend of footy, I thought, and a lot came out of it, and a lot more, probably more so for the losers than some of the winners. But we move on to next year for the guys that lost. But yeah, so I'll just get into these reviews of the games and start off with Port and Geelong. Pretty apparent earlier that the Cats were on top. Port hung in there for a bit, but the lack of quality over the ground and poor performance from their midfield really killed them. I thought spoke about during the week whether the Port midfield was able to, their best way to winning that game was to dominate, but ended up Geelong sort of getting on top and Dangerfield using his physicality, and Port didn't really have an answer for that, especially with Butters going down and not playing the second half. But missing Dan Houston and Kane Farrell, like I thought, was really going to hurt them. They had to rely on their mids to move the ball from end to end. So, and with no elite kicks apart from Bergman out of defence, they really struggled, and I think missed those two quite badly. They hadn't, they also dealt with an inability to score. I thought they looked pretty good when they targeted Georgiades. He played quite well, I thought, given the opportunities, but overall, just an inability to score. And when they went forward, it would have only looked worse had Tom Stewart have played. So, I guess they can count themselves pretty lucky that didn't happen as well. But otherwise, they were comprehensively beaten by the better team in the end, and the Cats just look ominous once again. Their midfield was great, as I said, led by Danger. The forwards just absolutely ran rings around the Port defence, and Jeremy Cameron as well showed why his best is as good as anyone else in the league yet again. But fun game for Geelong supporters, not so much for Port supporters. So we'll see how Port back it up this week, and we'll get into that one get into that one a bit later. But I think we'll move on to the Bulldogs and Hawthorn game. Obviously, for listeners of the podcast, I, for one, loved this result. The Doggies, early were contesting the ball pretty well, but the Hawks just dominated and had an answer for everything they threw at them after quarter time, I thought. Bevo sort of had the nightmare coaching night, which I sort of alluded to last week, where I didn't really have much faith in him compared to Sam Mitchell, and that sort of proved to be true. I think the main move that everyone scratching their heads was why you would put Bontempelli up forward in a final. He wasn't being tagged. He was just beaten at the ball at the contest, so let him fight back, and over the course of a full match you would have thought that he'd be able to get the better or at least break even against the Hawks midfield. But a poor decision by Bevo, I thought, and he was just left to... They have enough forwards up forward to get the job done. I don't understand why you felt the need to put him up there. That he wasn't going to break free up there either. So, I think that really lent into the Hawks' hands. And James Sicily was his matchup for a bit, and Sicily was just paying him no attention as well, intercepting at will. And, it was just, a very questionable decision. And then when he started in the middle at the start of the fourth quarter, they looked like they had some burst out of the stoppage again. But, it was a bit too late at that point. Didn't help that, Libba was getting crushed in his head-to-head by a bigger version of himself on the night, and Connor Nash, who I thought might go to Bontempelli, but he didn't end up happening. He went to Libba instead, and beat him quite convincingly, I thought. It was a disappointing game from Jamara, who I predicted wouldn't be much of a factor, and that rang true. Sam Darcy, on the other hand, showed why the hype is real for him. He let himself down a little bit with his field kicking at times, a few turnovers and a few ineffective kicks, but overall a pretty great first final for him, and shows why he's going to be the unicorn of the competition in a few years, I think. But the other one for the Doggies, Tim English, was just soundly beaten by Lloyd Meek in the ruck as well. Just gave the Dogs midfielders even less of a chance, I thought, on the night. And for the Hawks side, Sicily in the first half was amazing to keep the Dogs at bay with his intercepting and ball use. Jai Newcomb really proved again last week when I spoke about how good his form had been to close the season. He was playing similar to the likes of Lachie Neale and Paddy Cripps, so I think that rang true, and his third quarter was just unbelievable. I also said that him and Warple needed to be the second and third best mids to give Hawthorn a chance, and they were quite easily the first and second best mids, I thought, on the night, and that went a long way to winning. And then probably the most exciting thing of the night was the emergence of Culture Deer, I thought. There's a lot of talk about the obviously the Bulldogs' young gun forward line with Jamara and Sam Darcy and Aaron Norton's not that young anymore, but still there's a lot of chatter about them during the week. And I think Culture Deer had his Tom Hawkins 2011 finals emergence performance, I guess, and a great story for him and a great performance and an even better key forward prospect, I think, for the Hawks. So very excited for what Culture has to come. The Sydney and GWS game, I thought that the Giants controlled the game obviously most of the way through. Sydney had moments in the first three quarters but didn't quite get the mix right in the midfield. The Giants, on the other hand, probably didn't really dominate the midfield when Sydney weren't completely dominating that area. I think Heaney obviously had a big role in that. He played quite well across four quarters, and then Warner and Gordon and Papley as well got involved in the last quarter and absolutely dominated and pulled them over the line. But I think that the Giants played well enough to win it. Obviously, they just collapsed in that last quarter and couldn't deal with the heat. And I guess that's why the Swans were favourites for most of the year. Their midfield was just that dominant, and I don't think that many teams can go with them when they're all going at their best. But they need to keep that consistency between them, and if that happens, then they're as good a chance as anyone at winning the flag, I think. But Papley back in was obviously huge, and I think Braden Campbell's running and kicking ability in the last quarter really jumped off the screen as that super sub. And he's probably pretty stiff to be the sub. He's played quite well this year, but with all the ins they had, I think it's probably fair enough. And look, it worked. So all in all, probably the game of the year, I think, in all likelihood so far. Anyway, hopefully there's a few more ones to come, but it's going to be interesting to see how GWS bounce back. And I wonder whether it's harder to bounce back from a loss like that or a loss like Port Adelaide. Obviously both in qualifying finals, but you wonder if it's easier to come back from a flogging and just sort of throw that one away like Port Adelaide might have to do, or whether it's easier to bounce back from GWS's perspective where they know what it takes. They just weren't quite good enough on the night. But last one, we'll go in from the weekend, the Brisbane and Carlton game. We had a pretty dismal performance from Carlton, especially in the first half. Lots made of that stat line where they were 60-0 at one point, which is quite hard to do, I think, to actually be on zero. It just shows that their forward entries weren't very good at all, and there's a few reasons for that. I think I looked pretty silly after my prediction, quite clearly. I thought the Blues might have a chance and they'd get up, but I don't think anyone would have predicted that effort either, the way that they got beaten on the night. And as I said, soundly beaten, and it really started in the ruck, I thought. I spoke a bit about the midfield battle, and I thought Cripps being the best player, or who I thought was the best player, and I still probably think he is, out of all the midfields. I thought he'd be able to get it done, but it really started with Oscar McInerney just absolutely dominating Mark Piternay everywhere. And he got the Brizzy mids on top early in the game, and that really helped them and got them set up their contested ball winning game and set up the clearances for them. And they were just pretty dominant around the ground, weren't they? And Carlton's sort of inability to link up anywhere after their first sort of kick out of the back line is a serious issue. And I think that they need to find a better process in the off season and tactics to get the ball moving from end to end a bit better. They're really easy to lock the ball in. Teams forward 50s against sort of thing. So their plan of just bomb it down the line, pray that Harry and Charlie mark or give some sort of advantage to gather the ball on the ground for the smalls, and then if they win that contest, which often they weren't on the weekend, obviously, much to the probably due to because Charlie wasn't out there. Then if they do win that contest, then they just do the same thing and just bomb it inside 50 and hope for the best again. And it's just a horrible process for a team that requires so much of their stars. And it looks really bad when not everyone's at 100% or is not out there. They haven't really got a plan B at the moment, and to say it was all, well, it was pretty all bad, I guess. But I thought there was some good moments. Obviously, I thought George Hewitt played quite well. You got them going in that third quarter, but in general, the Blues do still need some more midfield depth. I think it doesn't help that their small forwards are so one-dimensional compared to other teams, and honestly, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they just let a few of them go, delisting or whatever. Like, apart from Matt Owies, who is shockingly out of contract and hasn't been offered one yet. Just don't believe that he's kicked 60 goals in the last 2 years combined, not in each one. Obviously, otherwise you'd be one of the best small forwards in the comp. But yeah, I think just those small forwards, none of them are that clean. None of them provide enough forward pressure or are big enough to stick tackles consistently, and none of them really go into the midfield like a lot of small forwards tend to do these days, or are capable of. Your Brent Daniels, your Dylan Moores of the world, etc. None of them really provide a point of difference. They're all just like clones of each other, and like, unless Charlie and Harry are there making their lives really easy, they don't really bring much to the table. But yeah, I think it comes down to them being so one-dimensional, like I said, and poorly coached on the night. And I think that Vossi has relied too much on their stars, who may never be 100% come the end of a season. And I just don't think that they're capable of winning a premiership as the team is currently constructed or currently coached. I think they absolutely need Tom De Koning healthy and rucking. I was very defensive of Mark Piternate, but he's just not very good, I guess. And I think that with having the both of them is like one thing, but Pito by himself is probably not the answer, especially at this time of year. And that just leads me to the coaching. Like, I don't know what was going on with that Matt Kennedy sub. He just provides you positional versatility. They were already worried that Tom De Koning wasn't going to make it through the game, so why would you sub out the guy that you've been playing in backup ruck along with Cripps throughout the year, and on the night Matt Kennedy was even in the ruck at one point. So it just didn't make sense to me from a positional versatility standpoint. Like, Kennedy as well could have played a defensive role in Harris Andrews, because until Jack Payne was subbed out, Harris Andrews was just left to himself. Like, Brody Kemp was trying to take him out of the contest, but Harris was just played such an instrumental role in that first half. And when Jack Payne had to get subbed out, he went on to Harry and became a little bit less of an influence there. But still, if that hadn't happened, I don't see why Kennedy wouldn't have been any worse than Kemp as well. So it's just another, like, you just took a club out of your bag if you're Vossi, I think. Then on top of that, you had those small forwards doing nothing out there anyway. So again, Kennedy couldn't have been worse than those guys. He actually provides some pressure around the contest, and I'm not going to act like he's a perfect player or anything, but I just can't believe that you'd have the likes of Fantasia or Motlop and Durden out there instead of him. Anyway, the frustration is real for Carlton fans, and I think with Cripps being 30 by the start of next season, you sort of start to worry that they might have wasted this window a little bit, where they've had two Coleman medal quality forwards and Jacob Wiedering as well, and Brownlow medalist in his prime. I think that the way that Cripps plays, he might be struggling a little bit to back that up next year. And I'm definitely not counting him out. I still think he's one of the best players in the league, but that question does start to become real as he enters his 30s. So something to worry about for the Carlton supporters, and we'll see how they go in the off season. Anyway, let's get into Port versus Hawthorn. So in general, just do the same structure as I did last week. So I just have a little bit of general, and then a bit on each team, a bit on Port, a bit on Hawthorn, and then some of the determining factors, I think, what are going to decide the game. So I'll do that for both semi-finals this week. And to start, Hawthorn and Port Adelaide played once this year, although some Hawks fans might be repressing that one. They've lost by 1 point in round 10, where they're up by 2 goals with about 25 seconds left or whatever it was. Much has been discussed of that this year, and I will not be discussing it anymore because that one hurt. Although it did trigger Hawthorn's run, I think, a little bit, so maybe thank you, Port. We wouldn't be where we are without that loss potentially. So for Port's side, obviously they're looking to bounce back from a very disappointing loss at home to the Cats. Sort of wonder if Zach Butters is going to get up. He's obviously very important to what they do. He struggled breathing during the game apparently, so not a great sign, and you'd really want him to be close to 100%, because you don't have to want to. You won't. I don't know whether they win it if he doesn't play anyway, but you definitely don't want to get to a point where he's played a quarter and you have to pull the trigger on your sub already. So yeah, that's one to watch for them. And as well, do you even bother playing Charlie Dixon? my thought is surely not. He was pretty useless, unfortunately, against Geelong. I think I've been a big Charlie Dixon fan for a long time, but I think his days in the AFL might be very much numbered at the moment. And if he was that bad against Geelong, Hawthorn have an even faster and attacking backline, so it really could look a lot worse than it did if they do decide to play him instead of a Todd Marshall. On the Hawthorn side of things, so the main thing to discuss is probably the Sam Frost news, where he's been ruled out for the season, and how does that impact them? I think he's had an absolutely great year. That being said, his role is replaceable. I don't think that Ethan Phillips is the one that's likely to come in for him. I don't think he's going to be as good as Frost by any means. That's the reason that Frost has been in the team all year, but I think that Ethan Phillips is capable of coming in and playing a role just to shut down one of the Port key forwards. And his only game for the year, ironically, was against Port Adelaide, so he will be somewhat familiar with the ground, with the team that he's playing against, and he just needs to hold down one of Charlie Dixon, Asava, or Todd Marshall or Georgiades, whoever he plays on, and I think he can do a decent job of that. And obviously if his role's pretty simple, just try and beat your man and then rely on Scrimshaw, Sicily and Co to sort of cover him in the air. I think that as much as the Frost loss which didn't happen for the Hawks' sake, but I think that he's one guy that they can potentially cover with Ethan Phillips. So as for the determining factors, I think they're sort of all, for me, it's all on Port's side of the thing after that performance on Thursday night it was in the end, but especially after the way the Hawks played and on Friday, I think that the answers have to sort of come from Port's side. I think that we know what to expect from the Hawks. After basically since round 8, they're going to bring manic pressure. They got great contest work, great at getting contested possessions, ground ball gets, etc. Clean hands, a great run and spread, and a variety of ways to kick goals. Port will have a lot of question marks from last week, obviously, and will their forward line even be able to score enough? Will their midfield be able to compete as they should? And will their back line be able to defend? So just on those, on the forwards, they're coming up against a very attacking Hawks back line, as I said with that Charlie Dixon comment earlier. They're going to have their work cut out for them, as they're not only going to need to score, but put a lot of pressure on as the Hawks rebound. I think that some of them are capable of bringing the heat, like Frankie Evans, Willie Rioli at his peak, and Judd McEntee as well, are capable of doing so, but also having, on the other flip side, having Asava Radaglia and Charlie Dixon, who are close to 0% pressure players, will probably kill the efforts that the others provide. They also are a bit of a Bomber and Hope team with their entries. They're not the greatest at lowering their eyes. That's why I said they looked good when they lowered their eyes and hit up Georgiades on the weekend, but I just feel like they don't do that consistently enough. And with Dixon so out of form and Radaglia as well, it's just okay up forward, I guess. You haven't got those guys that are going to clunk marks like they used to, I guess, which they sort of, I guess, became accustomed to kicking like that into Charlie Dixon at his peak. But I think that Hawthorn should be able to control that end of the ground, given that they have such great interceptors in their back line. But, even then, if Charlie Dixon and stuff are able to bring the ball to ground, the Hawks have shown they're the best ground ball team in the competition, so that doesn't really bode well for Port Adelaide either. I think Dimmer Hardwick as well is probably going to go to Willie Rioli, and we saw what he did to Cody Waitman on the weekend, and that didn't end too well for Cody Waitman, who was of a similar quality to Willie Rioli, if not a bit better. So I think the Port forward line is going to struggle to score, which again just puts even more pressure on their midfield to perform, and that takes me to their midfields on the side of things and the battle in there. This is the area that Port Adelaide should obviously be able to get on top of compared to Hawthorn. But that's obviously a question mark now. We saw last week they were not able to deal with the size of Geelong's midfield and Dangerfield specifically, but Hawthorn don't have a Dangerfield, but they have a Newcombe and a Nash, so I think that they're still going to have to be physical, and I think Jason Horne-Francis absolutely needs some help, and I can't help but think that maybe Connor Rosie and Butters aren't as talented as they are. may not be the best finals players given their, sort of slighter frames and inability to contest with some of the bigger bodies at times. And that's just compounded by the fact that Butters might be a bit underdone. I don't know if where they go there. Obviously, you're going to, I think that Jordan Sweet is probably a decent matchup to stop Lloyd Meek and his dominance, especially over Tim English on the weekend. But I think that might allow Portsmouth to get on top if he breaks even a bit more. But they have to bring the pressure on the Hawks at the same time. They can't just run one way. And I think that Port's midfield has sort of been, to blame for some of those efforts of not running back defensively or not putting pressure on. But I think, if you Port Adelaide as well, Willem Drew absolutely has to go to Jai Newcomb. If there are any chance, they need to be able to slow down Newcomb's impact because, as good as Worpel is not Will Day. So if Newcomb's out of the game, that match-winning midfielder for the Hawks probably isn't there unless Worpel has an absolute blinder. So I think that, without Will Day to turn to from the Hawks side, the Willem Drew absolutely has to go to Newcomb and try and stop his influence. I think that, Worpel might still play well in that scenario, but if Jai Newcomb isn't the best ground on the field like he was the best mid on the field like he was last week, it'll put a bit more stress on the Hawks' backline if the power can sort of win that inside 50 battle with the help of their midfield. So. I think that they need to do that, and I think Newcomb absolutely could be the best midfielder again in this game. He did it in a game where he went up against Bontempelli and Libba and Treloar and Ed Richards and stuff, so I have no reason to doubt his form at the moment, and I think that Port's midfield is going to have their hands very full as well, which I guess you probably wouldn't have thought at probably 6-7 weeks ago. If you said this was the matchup in the second week of the finals, you'd probably think Port's midfield would get on top quite easily, but that's not the case at the moment. And then for the defence side of things, this is probably the main worry here for Port. They struggled mightily against Geelong's small forward line, and obviously a bit biased, but I would argue that Hawthorn's fleet of small forwards is better than Geelong's, if not the same, if not better. I'll say that. There might be double bias there, me against Geelong and me for Hawthorn. But either way, it's worrisome for Port, given the fact that Geelong have literally just handed Hawthorn a blueprint of how to score heavily against them using their small forwards. You got Dylan Moore, Ginnivan, Nick Watson, Connor McDonald coming at you this week instead of Sean Manor and Brad Close and Myers and stuff. So I think that, using those small forwards to your advantage, creating a lot of space for your key forwards to work into, and making the Port defenders defend in space and one-on-one is something the Cats did really well, and I think Hawthorn will be able to do the same quite convincingly. So, obviously, I'll move on to the expected outcome. I think, as I said, obviously, I think the Hawks are going to win this one pretty comfortably. I think Port are just very shaky in a lot of areas right now. With all the injuries and suspensions they've suffered as well, so I definitely don't think it's necessarily a process thing that they're going to get beaten. I think just Hawthorn are just a bit too talented for them right now. The form that they're in, they couldn't be on opposite sides of the spectrum, I don't think. So, I think that, as I said, Port are a bit shaky in a lot of areas. They haven't got any elite kicks to get them out of trouble in defence when the pressure's on. Their midfield is a bit out of form and a bit underdone as well. Their forwards, apart from Georgiades and Rioli, look pretty pedestrian, and I think they're going to struggle to keep up in terms of scoring with the Hawks. And you compare that with Hawthorn's strengths at the moment, and I just can't really see a way that Port win this one unless they absolutely bring the best pressure they have for the year and are able to somehow stop the intercepting and rebounding of the Hawks back six. So I think the Hawks might be going through to a prelim up at the SCG. I'm very keen for this game on the weekend, and I'll be watching it closely, and hopefully the Hawks can get up for me. But moving on to the GWS and Brisbane game. Just generally, they've met twice this year, and both wins have gone to the Giants. So in round 7, after the Giants' hot start, they beat, and the Brizzies' slow start, they won 113-59 at NG Stadium. And then most recently, people probably remember this game, but 64-82 for the Giants in round 22. So just on the GWS side, are they able to put the disappointment of losing last week behind them and move on? I think they did a lot right, and they should be ready to play and back it up and bring that same pressure and ferocity, at least what they did for the first 3 quarters. I think that as well, Toby Bedford is expected to be back, which I think really hurt them against Sydney. They didn't really have that extra person to go and tag, a Warner or a Goulden or whoever it ended up being, and I think that might have actually cost them a little bit in the end. But maybe they don't get out to that lead with a defensive player in the middle as well. Who knows? That's hindsight is 2020, but he's going to be a big player for coming up against Brisbane's deep midfield this week, and he can either play a defensive role on Zorko in the forward line like he sort of started his tagging career with doing, or he can go straight into the midfield and try and take on a Lachie Neale head on. But yeah, I think definitely a great back for GWS this week, and we'll see how he goes and where he lines up. But on the Brisbane side, I guess, can they regroup and bring that first half performance into this week, because that second half was a little bit shaky, sort of what I was talking about last week, where I just don't trust them, and you sort of felt that watching the second half of the Blues game. Like, there's no way that the Blues should have even had a sniff, and there were moments where you thought, oh no, this is not going to go down this road, is it, where Brisbane are going to collapse, but they didn't, so credit to them. That first half was very impressive. Obviously 60-0 is nothing to sneeze at, but yeah, I just wonder whether they can do it 2 weeks in a row and bring that consistency. Jack Payne as well was probably the only injury issue for the Lions. He was subbed out, but is set to play through the injury, so that'll be a big in for, not in, but a non-out for Brisbane, considering he got subbed. For the determining factors, though, let's get into it. And I think that there's the big sort of matchup that could go a long way in deciding this matchup is whether Hogan's going to be the hero or Harris is going to be a giant killer. So I think Jesse Hogan, will he be able to dominate against this Brisbane defence? I think it's a tough ask, and if he gets Jack Payne and Harris Andrews is able to be the free man and come over the top, it's going to make life pretty difficult for him. So that's why that Jack Payne in is quite influential, I think, because it sort of frees up Harris a bit more to do as he pleases. On the other hand, though, Jesse has been that good this year that it might not matter, and his contested marking, which we saw some glimpses of against the Swans and patches where he looked absolutely dominant, might just come to the fore and be a bit too much for the Brizzy defenders. So, Jesse Hogan's always going to give GWS some great looks on goal through him, and what he generates for the small forwards at his feet. So that's one of the ways that he's going to be able to influence his game, is just if he's just that talented and that good and in that good a form. So it'll be obviously Brisbane's backline's going to have their hands full, and we've seen Jesse tear some games apart this year. So if he's able to do that, they're going to be well within their capabilities of winning this game. But and then on the other hand, Harris poses his own problems, and I do doubt he goes directly to Hogan. I don't think that'd be the matchup. Part of the Lions demolishing Carlton was Harris being impenetrable in the first half. In particular, he had, I think, 3 intercept marks and 7 intercept possessions for the game, which felt a bit light when I looked at the stats. But yeah, I swear every time he's just cleaning things up back there. So who can go to him from the GWS forward side and sort of do what Brodie Kemp was unable to do in that first half? And I think the obvious answer is Lachie Keefe. I actually think that's a pretty good matchup for him. Keefe has been a defender himself at times. He has the size to sort of match Harris Andrews that Kemp really didn't have on the weekend. And, I think he'll play a pivotal role in stopping his influence. And, I'd like to see him have the Billy Frampton impact that Billy Frampton had for Collingwood in the grand final last year. And, the blueprint is absolutely there to stop Brisbane's defence, and it is to stop Harris Andrews. If they're unable to do that, then they're going to struggle to score GWS. So I think that Harris Andrews is almost the most important player in this game. Whether he's going to be able to stop Hogan, first and foremost, I guess whether the GWS are able to stop him stopping Hogan. A bit of inception there, I guess, but I think that's probably the absolute key in this game. I don't know. If Lachie Keefe is able to do a job on Harris Andrews, then that opens up the game a lot for Jesse Hogan to dominate, I think. And then on the flip side, if Lachie Keefe or whoever is on Harris Andrews is unable to engage him and prevent the intercept possessions and spoils over the top, then it's going to be a long night for the Giants, because I just don't know how they're going to score a lot without Jesse Hogan getting a few on the board. But the other question, I sort of touched on it last week, is whether the Lions are going to choke or not. So again, like I had a big sort of segment on their breakdown last week against Carlton on, you know, how consistent are they and can they be reliable and why I don't necessarily trust them. But and I still think that is somewhat true. Like, yeah, they got over the line against Carlton, but you saw signs of it last week, even in the last half against the Blues. They're very unconvincing at times, and I think that the memories of that round 22 clash between these two teams might be in their head still. The Lions, for those who don't remember, were up by 30 at quarter time and ended up losing the game by 18. So probably not the worst, like in terms of giving up a lead, but it's very fresh, and you know, we'll see where that one ends up. I think that, yeah, I'm still not convinced on their consistency and performance from all their players and cohesion in general. I expect obviously the Brisbane mids to win out. I think that their midfield is probably too good for the Giants at the moment. But if that if that happens, it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily kick a winning score, because the Brisbane forwards still need to convert, which they really haven't all year. I don't know why all of a sudden come finals they're just going to be a better and more accurate team. But, you know, that's why I think, you know, the Giants mids could get beaten, as I sort of expect them to do, and still do enough, break even enough. Like, obviously, can't put an exact number on it, but do enough to put themselves in a position to win. This year, they've had a 54.4% goal accuracy compared to 46.4% for the Lions. So that's on the year, and they boast an even better conversion rate of inside 50 to marks as well, and they lead the league this year in terms of the rate of marks they take inside 50 per inside 50, and they're leading it at 25.7% on the year. So I think that, yeah, that sort of highlights my point. Look, that the Giants mids could get beaten and they could lose the territory battle, but they may just win because they're just more efficient going inside 50 in terms of like getting quality shots on goal and being accurate as well from when they get those shots. So obviously those things are tied together, but I think that definitely stacks in the Giants' favour. And yeah, the last sort of point I wanted to make is whether the Lions can keep up, and does the pace of play really matter? So who's that going to favour, I guess, or like who's going to dictate that is probably the better question. So the Lions prefer more of a kick mark sort of game and rely on stoppages to get that going, compared to the Giants, who, once they get possession, you know, they want to run in space. So on the Giants side, they're number 2 in the league for handball receive differential on the year, and 4th in uncontested possession, and 1st in uncontested possession differential. So, you know, they're able to get the game in a run, open space sort of format, and they don't really let opponents do the same, as instructed by the fact that they're 1st in uncontested possession differential. But Brisbane as well, which sort of compounds that, are not great at bringing the heat and bringing pressure required to stop that style of game that the Giants will bring. They're 2nd last in tackles, 11th in tackles inside 50, and 16th for pressure acts to the line. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to bring the heat this week. I think that if they don't, that the Giants might just run over the top of them quite a bit, and sort of what I was saying with the you know, with the consistency and efficiency side of things, like if everything hinges on the Lions' sort of ability to bring the heat, and if they're not able to do that, and Harris isn't able to stand up, then it's going to be a tough arvo for them. But, you know, the Lions, though, they had a very easy opening fixture, and they might not be ready to bring that heat, and, you know, the run that the Giants are going to bring, whether the Lions are going to be ready for that. But the Lions themselves, as I said, they prefer that kick mark sort of game, and they have a few trump cards themselves, especially the stoppages. So, the stoppages and their ability to score from turnover are probably the two things that are going to drive their game, which I sort of touched on with the Harris and the midfield stuff. But, you know, the Lions rank much better in stoppage work compared to the Giants. They're 2nd in clearance differential on the year, so obviously Lockie Neal is leading the charge there, but the quality and depth of their midfield is real. I think that Oscar McInerney is going to probably get a very clear win over Kieran Briggs in the ruck specifically, not necessarily around the ground, but yeah, definitely in the actual hit-outs, he's gonna dominate and give the Lions the first chance. I think that the the Lions as well, they're third in scores from turnover and first in scores from turnover differential. So they absolutely make you pay and prevent you from doing the same. GWS, on the other hand, turn it over the fifth most in the league, so they may give the Lions ample opportunity to make them pay in this regard. So obviously those things are driven by some of their best players, their stoppage work with Lachie Neal and co, and then their ability to score from turnover starts with Harris creating so many turnovers and their backline in general, and then Zorko being able to, hit up the right targets when they do get the ball back. And so I think that with that being said, let's get on to some predictions for this game. I think that it will come down to whose backline sort of holds up the most a bit. I think that more so on the Lions side, but the Giants will run through the Lions in parts of the game, give themselves some good entries for Hogan and Green to capitalise on, and the Lions will win stoppages and probably get more chances overall. But as I said, the backlines I think are going to be pretty telling in this game. I think if Sam Taylor and Buckley are able to defend well enough and repel a lot of the entries, then that combined with Harris potentially being taken out of the game, where I don't think Brisbane are going to do the same at the other end to Sam Taylor and Buckley, but I think that gives sort of GWS the upper hand to be able to defend a bit better. Obviously, if Harris is able to dominate, that changes this equation a little bit, but I don't necessarily expect him to be able to as much as last week anyway. And then combining that with, Brisbane's shakiness in front of goal, and I feel like GWS are just the safer pick here, so I'm going to go with them. I think that their game style really could force a blowout here if Brisbane are unable to convert their opportunities and bring the pressure, especially at home. And they are at home, like I just said, and they're ready for the finals intensity. They just played to the Swans in a much more intense game than Brisbane did, and Brisbane sort of had it all their own way in that first week. So I don't know whether they're necessarily ready for this one, and that's why I'm going to go with the Giants here. So I've got the Hawks and the Giants this week winning. I think that that's sort of where I think they're a bit clearer sort of outcomes than maybe in the first week of finals would suggest that for these teams, but the first week of finals matters, and not to say that the Lions didn't perform well, and compared to I'm comparing them to Port here a little bit, but I think that based on the evidence we have on the first week that these four teams have had, I just can't really see the Lions being consistent enough nor Port good enough to win this week. So wouldn't have thought that going into the finals potentially, but it all matters. So anyway, I'm very excited for this weekend, and hopefully the Hawks can go one more and get up to Sydney and take on the Swans. But got to get through Port this week, and GWS got to get through Brisbane. So we'll be back next week with the same sort of structure, bit of review, bit of preview, and then everyone have a good week. Alrighty, catches.